Alright, so I'm going to do a video really quick while Zara is asleep. And, no, Zara is doing some stuff on the tablet, and then Zeta is asleep. Zoe, of course, is at school, and I'm in between a meeting call. But anyhow, I want to kind of discuss a little bit about what basically happened with the election, my take on it, that type of thing. I think that for some people, this is a personal thing. I think that sometimes people feel a little bit attacked by the outcome of an election, especially one such as this, and they get really wrapped into what happened, and they will take, sometimes especially if their friends vote one way versus how they may have voted, they take it as a personal slight, and it's hard sometimes to rationalize it. And you may see it as that person may think of you in a totally different light, or they may think of certain groups of people in a totally different way. And that may not be the case. There are some people who will say that the people who voted for Trump also voted for President Obama before, and that type of thing, and all of that. And there will be some people that will say that people voted for Trump because they may have a racist view or sexist view, or they may have X, Y, and Z. And all of that may be true, but there are also some that definitely may not have voted for him for that reason, and they probably voted for him because they felt like they needed new blood in the entire system. And he represents new blood, for better or for worse. And that you have a structure on both sides that is really inadequate, in my opinion. And I think that there's a lot of structures that have been put in place over the decades that are no longer really working. And so you've had many different folks that have come through Congress that have really not done a lot. So for some people, this was a chance to say, look, we're not being heard. There's been many different movements that have come up to try to affect that change, and it just hasn't happened. What people should also understand is that change takes time. So with Trump, he's not going to make huge gangbusters because it just doesn't work that way. A president has very little impact on what happens in one particular state. It's more or less your governor, and it is more or less up to the mayor of a city more than it is a president. So I think that people have to understand that. I think you also have to look at the big picture of things and what can you do to impact and change things locally in your area, because that also has a lot to that really impacts you a whole lot more many times than a presidential race. My major concern would be if there's like a huge war and it brought war to the U.S. shores based on a president more so than anything else. Here in Seattle, I'm pretty much insulated from really any decision that the president will do. Even our mayor has said that, there's certain things that he will forego, including federal funding, to oppose some of the things that he disagrees with the president. Seattle has a lot of money. There's a lot of construction jobs here that's going to help supplement the incomes for many people that are not even in the construction industry. So a lot of restaurants, a lot of people are going to buy homes. We just passed a $54 billion transit package, which will help build the light rail infrastructure until 2040 or something like that. There's also a lot of construction jobs in terms of just building all the buildings that are going up around here, and that have already been paid for and that are planned for the next several years. So based on that, based on all the big companies that are based here, really there's not much of an impact that even the recession had on Seattle. It was still growing quite fast, just not as fast as it is now, and it didn't stay in the recession as long as others. On top of that, our family is not really impacted much because Noelle has a job that really is kind of recession proof. Universities and colleges typically aren't impacted. Staff aren't really impacted, especially a university such as the one that she works at. And when you're in your own business, those things can fluctuate, but it's kind of an industry where people need it. When you get involved in real estate, or if someone's a doctor or someone's working at a university, those are kind of recession proof because people are always going to need a home or a place to rent, and people are always going to go to the university, especially with an international university that we have. So I've always made sure of in my lifetime to prepare for anything, because it's not always the president that's the problem. It could be someone at your job who gets put into a position where they can downsize you at any point in time. So I always believe in having secure protections for my family so that no matter what, we can be as prepared as possible, save up as much money as possible, make sure that we don't get into any debt whatsoever, make sure that we live definitely below our means, because you never know what could happen. So I always make sure, and also have jobs that are as recession proof as possible. With that said, there are going to be some people that are upset, and there's been a lot of protests that have been going on and things like that. And whether you agree or disagree, it's not really the point. What I think that people should really do, especially if they're upset about this, is one, definitely take a break from things like social media. It was hard for me not to get wrapped up in some of the ideology that some people had, and you're going to have people who lack the ability to show empathy. They don't show empathy for really anything, and that's just a part of their DNA. There are some people who cannot do that for whatever reason. So on social media, I kind of say social media is just like a person's home. It's kind of like the castle doctrine, right? Which is that people are their true selves when they're in their home. And it's the same thing when people are in their car. You see that person's true personality when they're in their car. That true person is there. You're not going to meet the true person sometimes at work. You're not going to meet that true person when you go to a party or something like that. That true person's personality is when they're in their home, in their car, and on social media. And the best thing I can say is definitely avoid social media right now, because you're going to have a whole lot of toxic spew that's going on, especially if you feel one way and you have someone that feels the other way. It's just not going to mesh. The best thing to do is to be around people that think like you so that you can air your grievances or air your joy, versus people who think differently than you right now, because everything's just so fresh. That would be my suggestion. I also try to make sure that I keep, as I mentioned before, I keep my friend base very, very, very small for a reason. Because even outside of this election, I feel personally that it's best to have really my family as my core base, because sometimes friends will drag you into situations that are not good, or you have to deal with certain things. Over the years, I've just learned to keep my friend base very, very small. But also outside of that, outside of YouTube, I limit the amount of social media that I've done. I've been doing that consciously over time. Now, of course, I will update my social media accounts like YouTube and anything that's tied to this channel, because I consider that like a hobby and that type of thing. The other things in terms of social media, like my personal Facebook account, kind of walking away from that, kind of walking away from all of my personal private things and more or less things that involve the actual channel, because you're going to have people who you've known over your entire life, and we've moved so much that the mentality, the thought, the values of people from different parts of the country are going to be completely different than what they are here in Seattle. One of the reasons why we moved here is because of really kind of how we think and how we believe and that type of thing, as well as we want to be in a place where our children are going to be able to see other kids that look like them and be very much well accepted and received. So that's one of the reasons why we actually moved here. But I would say for people, the best thing to do is have this pursuit of happiness, and I believe in that. To me, the pursuit of happiness is making sure that you have your core friends and those that don't create a lot of issues for you. Secondly, avoid a lot of things like social media that really is kind of a time waster. I hate to say it, Facebook, things like that, where you're going to have a whole range of 1,000 different opinions and this constant infighting. Third, affect change in your local community. If there's certain things that really just piss you off, or things that you don't really agree with, or things that you wish would happen, you know, start working with groups. There's tons of groups that try to make that happen, and voice your concerns so that those issues are actually addressed. Really, the national politics they're going to impact you more in certain areas than in others. Again, there's some states where they will feel the impact of national decisions much more than places like, say, Seattle. But if you really and truly want to make a big difference outside of what happens in Washington, you have to start on the local level, because that impacts you before really anything else. That's the biggest key. And also invest in yourself. I always believe that people should truly invest in them. Look at themselves as a brand that you're presenting to whatever job you're going to. So if that means to get more education, more skills, whatever the case may be, learn a different language, then do so. And then finally, there's a lot of talk about California succeeding from the U.S. and people leaving to go into Canada. My question is, why do people always want to say, let's go to Canada? I mean, personally, I'd rather go to Japan, but that's just me. Those are things that are just built out of frustration. You know, now, will California succeed from the U.S.? Highly unlikely. There's a lot more talk about it. I just don't see that happening. It's very, very difficult to do. Not saying it won't, because crazy things do happen. But I just don't really see that happening. But really the best thing that you can do is to join organizations that you believe in, do things in your community that can actually make change, invest in yourself, make sure that you have a bubble that you work well in, and you can do a lot more to basically achieve that pursuit of happiness. So that's what I strive for every day. That's what this channel is about, is to be positive. Even when there's times of darkness, even in times of joy, you always have to keep perspective on things. Sometimes things are not as bad as you may think it will be. It may not be as bad as you may think, and it may be that there's some good that can come out of it, especially if you focus more on improving yourself. That's pretty much it. That's all I have. Hope you guys have a great day. Think positive. You know, put it in perspective. Until next time, I'll see you. Take care.